Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about my top 5 personal favorite campaigns in Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. These are not necessarily the campaigns I consider the best in the game, but these are the campaigns I enjoy the most. The ones that I keep coming back to again and again and again, and ones that I think do give you a good amount of choice and variety in the way you approach them. So at number 5, we have Emperor Karl France. Out of the Empire campaigns, Elspeth, Gelt, and Karl, the 3 campaigns that we have that are actually worth playing of the Empire right now, I think Karl actually has the most interesting one. Don't get me wrong, Gelt and Elspeth are very, very strong Legendary Lords, but their campaigns kind of feel one-dimensional. Like with Elspeth, it's always doing the same thing, going over here for Saarland, and you could go for Karakazor, sure, you can vary things, but it ultimately ends up with you dealing with Vlad. You can try and vary things out, but that's kind of what your campaign objective is. With Gelt, it's always about trying to get as much power out of Cathay as possible one way or another. Sure, things can vary after like the turn 20 mark for both Elspeth and Karl, but before that point, not quite as much. Whereas for Karl, things do vary a lot from the very first few turns of your campaign. Because you can go over here in Bretonia one way or another, like you can go after Bastan, you can go after Kemmler over here. And the reason you may want to do so is because if you leave Kemmler alone, he will take Marienburg, and that may result in Lewin showing up and taking Marienburg back from him, creating a whole mess of a situation for you to ultimately deal with if you're playing this campaign in the long term. But that's one path. The other path involves a great deal of cheese. The cheese is you take these 3 settlements, you region trade them again and again to Marienburg, and then you provoke certain wars to Confederate Marienburg early on. That is the cheesy path. But then you can also consider, okay, maybe I want to preserve Midland. So I go over here, I fight to try and keep Midland alive. I deal with the Black Pig Orcs, I deal with Kazrak, and then potentially I deal with Festus. Or I ignore Festus for a while and go after Vlad. That is the great aspect of this particular campaign. That there are many different ways to play this specific campaign and many different options. Also, the fact that you have a mega city over here with Altdorf means that you can get all the heroes relatively quickly without doing some annoying, oh, I'm going to build this just to get the hero and then get rid of it to swap to get another hero. You do want to do this to a certain degree, of course, but nowhere near as much as Gelt or Elspeth, especially nowhere near as much as Gelt. So that is one very significant advantage I feel in this campaign, just the sheer variety of options that you do have available. Besides, in terms of campaign mechanics, I do find campaign mechanics that give you choice and flexibility on the campaign map as opposed to battles, which is what Gelt and Elspeth are more focused on. I mean, they have some campaign bonuses, but clearly a lot of their bonuses are geared towards making their armies more deadly in combat. Whereas with Karl, it's all about focused on the campaign side of things. So that is a great advantage from my point of view. At number 4, it would have to be Morathi of the Dark Elves. Now, for the record, in terms of character design and interesting characters, I do think Malekith is actually the most interesting character of the Dark Elves to actually play, but his campaign can feel very, very one-dimensional. So no, I'm not picking Morathi because she's a woman. I'm picking Morathi because I think her campaigns are her campaign can be very interesting and very varied. Like, how do you deal with Astankia, for instance, is going to be a major choice. How do you deal with Mazdamundi over here? Do you, for instance, go over here and ally Mazdamundi by taking Skeggi for him, or you take this territory, declaring war on the Skaven, selling it to him, and getting an alliance? Or do you wipe out Mazdamundi and maybe decide, okay, I'm just going to ally Cathay because that might be a better option? That is a great choice. An interesting aspect about the Dark Elves is that while the High Elves do really hate them, they're the only race in the entire game that does really hate them. So your aversion with other races is something that you can actually manage quite very well with the vast majority of factions. Because yes, it might be minus 40, but minus 40 is a fairly manageable number, especially with all the economic power and region training they can do as the Dark Elves inherently. I also really like the Dark Elves because they get a lot of hero capacity relatively quickly. Though Morathi, funnily enough, actually gets it less than others because she can only get K-Knight Assassins at tier 4, but that's kind of a hero you don't really care too much about. But it's that diplomatic capability that Morathi has that does Elevator. Like, I've played campaigns as Marafi where I could ally half the freaking world after conquering Wolfwan. It's like, say hello to the real Slaaneshi Empire. No joke, seriously. The one thing you do, you're forced more or less to do, is take down Lothern, but that's not really, or Wolfwan, though, yeah. Unless you care about your long campaign victory condition, you just only really need to take down Lothern. But why Lothern? Why Tyrion? Well, because there is the corrupted flame of Asuryan, which gives you 100 diplomatic relations with High Elves, so you can manage things with Telfarian and Alariel. If you want to, that's up to you. You can also sneak up on Tyrion to deal with crippling blow to Lothern, so you don't have that grinding invasion of Wolfwan that it can descend into. So, like, dealing with Wolfwan, either go hard from the very beginning or go home, because it's going to be a nightmare of a situation. But you have choice over here with Nagron, you have choices with Wolfwan, and while the climate in the rest of the campaign is not necessarily the best, the fact that you have so much frozen climate available to you, and how you deal with all the factions around here, be it Katep, Sisters of Twilight, Silustra, etc., does present a great deal of options that you don't necessarily have in many other campaigns. It is a bit one-dimensional in the sense that, yes, you do end up having limited territory, but you got the entire Chaos Wastelands available to you as well, so, and, like, basically, you can conquer from here all the way to here. It might be focused on the north, but damn, isn't there a great deal of focus? Sure, Norska may not be the best, because, you know, there's a lot of mountains in the central part of Norska, but the coastline is frozen, so that's perfectly viable for you to go for. Lots of choices, lots of flexibility, lots of power available in this campaign. So, I do think it's great. It's genuinely, like, I know a lot of people like Lokir. I do like Lokir, but if I'm playing a real world domination campaign, Marafi is a great freaking choice for that. At number 3, it would have to be Queek Headtaker. Why not Ikeclaw or Snitch or Fraught? Well, the reason is, if you're playing Ikeclaw and Fraught, I find the campaign starts for both of those campaigns to be pretty damn obnoxious, I'm not gonna lie. Like, it's always the same thing, like, you want to abandon Skaven Blight or help it to get them to a higher tier settlements. The power is there, the nuclear arsenal or the bestiary that Fraught has, it is significant. But in all those those two campaigns, it always is that obnoxious start that they have to deal with their initial settlements. And with Snitch, while Snitch has a much better campaign in a lot of ways, it's always one-dimensional in the following aspect. You're always going to have to fight fricking Cafe. Whereas with Queek, you do have a fricking load of choices to go for. You want to ally Scarbrand? Go ahead. You want to beat up Scarbrand and ally someone else? Go ahead. You want an ally Gorbad? Go ahead. You want to engineer a war between factions so you can, for your own amusement? Go ahead. Sure, you will have to find the dwarves and the factions of Order, but there's plenty of opportunities over here with Chaos Dwarves, with Khorne, even with Manfred for whatever reason, or more likely Cetra, if you want to be best buddies with Cetra. That's your choice. So, great deal of choices and variety from that perspective. But beyond just the diplomatic perspective, I gotta say that from a terraining perspective, not having to have an obnoxious situation with Testalia or with Kislev is a significant win in my freaking books. So you have two really good provinces over here with settlements close enough to each other that you can really make it work as Skaven. That is a great situation. It's a strong defensive advantage. And you have different ways of dealing with this campaign as well. Because you might say, oh, let me just rush Carricade Peaks. Well, what if you don't rush Carricade Peaks? What if you save up your food so you can get Carricade Peaks at tier 5 the moment you take it? Well, that's a bit of a different discussion altogether, isn't it? Of course, you got to deal with Skarsnik. You got to keep that in mind. But it is a great campaign with a lot of choices and flexibility available to it. Like, yeah, you can rush for Carricade Peaks, you may win, sure, there's a full stack of troops there, but you can also take the territory around Carricade Peaks and then deal with Carricade Peaks, take it at tier 5, unlock yourself a significant level of power. Unlike Belagar, you only suffer -2 control in your provinces, and let me tell you, for Skaven, that's Tuesday. That's insignificant as a downside. So it ends up being a really good campaign, and honestly, I would dare say that out of the Carricade Peaks campaign, be it Belagar, Skarsnik, and Queek, I'd say Queek does have the most interesting campaign out of all of them. Don't get me wrong, Skarsnik is absurd once he gets stock stance on all of his armies, but I do feel Skarsnik's campaign is a bit too one-dimensional, because it's always the same bloody thing with Thorgrim, for instance, and then it's like, GG, well played, you won. That's essentially Skarsnik's campaign in a nutshell. Like, oh, you beat Thorgrim, you won the campaign. Good job, you won the campaign. Whereas with Queek, because you're a Skaven and so many people do hate you, and inherently people do hate you, and you're going to have to work for diplomacy, though you can, again, make it work. And it's kind of interesting to think about the Skaven. You might think the Skaven are just brutes who want to backstab and betray everyone, but the Skaven actually benefit a lot by not playing as Skaven. I'm not joking. Making alliances, honoring deals, getting trade agreements, because you can actually generate a good amount of trade resources, and especially with some of the resources that you do have around you. Over here, be it lumber, diamonds, or there are a great deal of choices that you can use in this campaign. You can also put that little rodent of JKPrimative in this place. Don't play Tretch's campaign. It's the most awful fucking campaign in the game for a reason, or one of the... Not awful, but pointless. Like, completely irrelevant of a campaign. I'm not sure why it exists. But yeah, I do like Queek. I think he's a very thematic Skaven character. He works very well in a campaign. He may not have unique campaign mechanics like Ikaclaw or Fraught or Snitch, but as far as a generic lord goes, that does work incredibly well. I think Queek is it. And number 2, it would have to be Malachi McCason for me personally. Now, I do think this is the best campaign in the game. The reason I think it is the best campaign is that dwarves naturally give you a lot of choice, flexibility, and options between their legendary grudges, their confederation of legendary lords, and the overall Age of Reckoning system. Which, by the way, I gotta mention this, I do find it a bit ridiculous that people were like, oh, it's so horrible that we have Age of Reckoning. We imagine actually having to go out there and play the game instead of sitting on your ass. But dwarves sit on their ass. No, they don't. If you read the lore, you tell me with a straight face that dwarves sit on their ass. Failures that call themselves dwarves but are really Elgi sit on their ass. And that's probably a perfect example. Like in the end time, Zungrim bemoans the fact that after Thorgrim is killed, the dwarves have just basically abandoned hope and sealed themselves in their holds, and he's leading an army of slayers to save Averheim, or to find Averheim. Just a small example on that particular subject. But look, I like this campaign. Between the choices of the unit buffs, between the legendary grudges, the Age of Reckoning, the Confederation with legendary lords, the climate, the starting position, the opportunities of that starting position, is an amazing campaign. But why is it number 2? Well, the reason it's number 2 is that after 300 hours spent in this game playing this campaign, you kind of feel the, strain, if you will. So, I still really enjoy this campaign. I've spent a lot of hours in this campaign, and I kind of want to play something else that's as good as this campaign. And unfortunately, there's only a handful of other campaigns. Like, all the other campaigns that I've put on this list don't even come close to how good this campaign is. That is saying a lot. Now, I could have put a lot of dwarves on this list and just made it an entire dwarven list, because I do actually like, Thorgrim's campaign, for instance, quite a bit, but one legendary lord for each race on a list like this, and I think Malachi is just by far and away the most interesting dwarf to play, one of the best campaigns to play, and objectively the best campaign in the game in a lot of freaking ways. I've played it too much. That's all I gotta say, really. And isn't that saying a lot? I've got over 3,000 hours in Immortal Empires alone, and a tenth of that is this campaign. Should give you an idea of how I feel about it. And finally, and number 1 for me at the moment, is Arbol the Undefeated. The reason I really like this campaign is, honestly, I really like Khorne right now. I think that the changes that they've made to Khorne, compared to all the crybabies who are like, oh, Khorne is perfectly fine. No, it's not fine. It wasn't fine before. It was very one-dimensional, very boring. But now Khorne is one of the most dynamic and interesting races in the game to play, because you have a great deal of unit variety you can choose from. It does work. The split between demon and mortal settlements isn't especially the best in the world, but it does work in the sense that you play a campaign where the settlements you hold, you don't hold settlements for the sake of an economy. The Khorne economy is the Skull economy. Skarbrand is the lecturer on how the economy works in Warhammer 3. It's just that simple. Skulls and cash are the way an economy works in Warhammer 3. And all this stuff about building stuff for the sake of economic potential is just a massive waste of time in a campaign, given the current pacing of a campaign. And this is actually an important bit, because you may have great campaigns, great races, but because of the design of those races and because of the difficulty design of the game, you do kind of get tired of starting the campaign over and over and over again, and spending 20 turns to get to a point where things actually get interesting, especially because in 10 turns after that, the campaign is likely over. Well, with Arbol, I think one of the comments one of my viewers left is exactly how I feel about this campaign. This is the one campaign in the game where I play it and I don't care about the victory conditions. I'm not going over here every couple of turns to look, oh, how many settlements do I need to win? I just do it, and I have fun doing it. The army is fun. The campaign movement around the map, just a movement around the map is fun. The only thing that you may have to do, the only thing that's repetitive over here is taking Zarnagrund early on, and even then you don't need to do that if you choose to. It will give you greater unit variety, and it is actually a challenge because, let's just say Khorne, for all the strengths and powers that it has, Castor endgame armies can counter you if you're not careful about that. So it is a really fun, dynamic, and interesting and compelling campaign in so many different ways. And while I haven't played it as much as Malachi's campaign, to be sure, I do find myself being drawn back to it again and again. Like, my issue with Khorne was always, like, getting Warriors of Chaos, an army of just purely Chaos Warriors, and winning with that was the way to go, and I find the Blood Toast a complete fucking gimmick. Well, now you get Chosen, and Skull Reapers, and Wrathmongers, and Chaos Knights with Lances, and Minotaurs. Imagine actually recruiting Minotaurs in a Khorne campaign. I've done this. Holy shit, did CA make Khorne a fun race? Like a race where you're not giving a shit about your economic situation, because Khorne doesn't care about money, right? It is great what they've done. I find it far more enjoyable than Scarbrand ever was, though funnily enough, I actually do enjoy Scarbrand a great deal more nowadays than I ever did pre-patch. People say, oh, it's too normal like other campaigns. Yeah, it was one-dimensional crap, I'm gonna say it as firmly as possible. It was strong, it was very boring as a campaign, from my point of view. This is fun. And Scarbrand is fun. Skulltaker actually has the weakest of the Khorne campaigns, and I think that's saying something about the Omens of Destruction Legendary Lord designs. Maybe they'll fix that, so improve that in a patch. Though you need to fix Lestria CA, just pointing out. I mean, yeah, Scarbrand is more interesting. Arbol is far more interesting. Like, it's kind of a bit silly, because I kind of wish Warriors of Chaos actually played anywhere near as good as this guy does. Don't get me wrong, Warriors of Chaos are a very powerful race, very dynamic, but they're too much of a joke. What I like about this campaign is you are extremely powerful, undeniably so, but you do risk losing. Like, you lose a battle with Arbol, you can retreat from before the battle, but if you lose a battle with Arbol, once you've engaged, campaign is effectively over. I think that's the best way to view it. I mean, you don't necessarily lose, you can keep playing it, etc., but that's the intent of this campaign, Play that campaign, kind of an Iron Man mode, but in a much, much better way than the crap Iron Man mode has ever been. Like, the concept of an Iron Man mode campaign is always fun and interesting until it's put in practice, because most of the time it's some gimmick. Whereas with Arbol, you can keep playing, but you've kind of failed, right? And you accept that you failed. Whether or not you want to keep going, that's a different thing. So it feels rewarding when you're pulling it off. It feels fun, it feels dynamic, it feels interesting. I do think some of the armies that do get created through his challenges, we should have more challenges against Legendary Lords as opposed to just random armies, because like right now I do get a lot of those random challenges. Funnily enough, the Old World mod does actually do this better, because you do actually get Legendary Lords as challenges there far more often than over here. That is interesting. So you get to beat up a lot of different characters. Amazing scaling, amazing handling of a campaign, works very, very well. Costin, signing out. Stay tuned for more.